I've always believed that being a mother meant sacrifice. I wore that word like a badge of honor, convincing myself it was proof that I loved my children enough. I sacrificed my 20s to raise them, my 30s to feed and clothe them, my 40s to send them to school, and my 50s to keep them afloat when adulthood revealed itself to be harder than they imagined. By the time I reached 59, my body was tired, my back bent from decades of double shifts, and my hands lined with stories of labor no one wanted to hear. But my heart still beat for Emily and Luke. Every decision I made, every dollar saved, every hour worked, every dream postponed was for them. I was a widow by 41. My husband Richard died of a sudden heart attack while driving home from work. The world didn't give me time to grieve. One moment, I was a wife sharing bills and burdens, and the next, I was a single mother staring at two frightened children and a mountain of debt. People always talk about the tragedy of death, but they don't talk about the paperwork, the bills that don't pause for your tears, the bank that doesn't care about your broken heart. I cried at night and smiled in the morning. I cooked pancakes and signed forms. I hid the overdue notices under piles of laundry. I became both soft and steel because my children needed both. Emily. My firstborn was my hope. She was always the serious one, bookish focused. I imagined her becoming a doctor or a lawyer, carrying my sacrifices into a brighter future. Luke, 2 years younger, was carefree, a dreamer who strummed guitars and talked about traveling the world. I balanced them both, the weight of Emily's ambition and the fragility of Luke's wandering spirit. And somehow, despite everything, we survived. More than survived, we lived. I cheered at graduations, sent them off to their first apartments, and told myself the long nights of hunger and exhaustion had been worth it. So when Emily announced she was engaged to Andrew, I felt a rush of pride. My daughter was building a life of her own, and I wanted to give her the wedding she deserved. I knew money was tight, but I had been saving quietly for years, every coupon clipped, every overtime shift, every vacation not taken. By the time she slipped that ring on her finger, I had nearly $80,000 set aside. My gift to her would be a wedding without financial fear. I told her I could cover $30,000 up front, and if needed, another $50,000 was waiting. Her eyes sparkled with tears. She hugged me hard. "Mom, you're incredible," she whispered. In that moment, I believed I was. Planning began quickly. Venues, caterers, photographers, all booked with my money. I signed checks with a smile, ignoring the twinge in my stomach each time I watched my savings dwindle. This was for Emily, I reminded myself. For her happiness, for her once-in-a-lifetime day. Luke teased me, saying I was acting like the bride myself with all my excitement. Maybe I was. Maybe deep down I wanted to live through her, to feel that I had done something right, that my sacrifices had bloomed into joy. And then came the email. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just finished folding laundry, the hum of the dryer still in my ears. My phone buzzed. The subject line read, "Regarding the wedding." I smiled, expecting a list of things Emily wanted me to handle, maybe seating charts or flower arrangements. Instead, as I opened it, the words cut through me like glass. "Mom, after discussing with Andrew and his family, we've decided the wedding needs to be a more intimate affair. Please don't come. It will be easier for everyone if you watch the live stream. Thanks for understanding." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just instructions, cold and final. I stared at the screen, reading and rereading, waiting for it to change, waiting for some hidden message to appear. My chest tightened. My breath caught. My own daughter, the child I had carried in my body, the girl I had rocked through fevers and heartbreaks, the woman whose future I had financed with my very life, was telling me not to come to her wedding, to sit behind a screen like a stranger. I dropped the phone onto the table and pressed my face into my hands. The tears came hot, furious. But beneath them was something colder, sharper: betrayal. This wasn't just exclusion, it was erasure. A lifetime of love dismissed with a few sentences in an email. I thought of the $30,000 I had already given the vendors, booked with my money, the extra $50,000 I had promised to transfer the following week. Did she think of me as nothing more than a wallet? Had I really raised a daughter who saw me as disposable once the money was secured? The next morning I called Luke, my son, my dreamer. When I told him, his voice cracked with anger. She what, Mom? That's insane. You've given her everything. You're her mother. How could she? He stopped, too furious to finish. His anger mirrored mine, but it didn't soothe me. Nothing could. For days, I walked through life in a haze. At work, I typed numbers into spreadsheets, but couldn't remember them after. At home, I sat in silence, the email replaying in my head. I looked at old photo albums, Emily in her cap and gown, Emily on her first day of kindergarten, Emily holding my hand at the beach, and I wondered, at what point did the girl in those pictures stop seeing me as her mother and start seeing me as an inconvenience? Then came the phone call from the venue. They were politely reminding me about the upcoming payment, the $50,000 balance. My hand shook as I held the receiver. I thought of Emily's email, her cold dismissal. And for the first time in decades, I made a choice, not from sacrifice, but from self-respect. I'm sorry, I told the manager. I won't be making that payment. You'll need to speak with my daughter directly. The silence on the other end was thick. Then the voice replied, "But ma'am, your name is on the contract." I know, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I'll take the penalties. But I will not fund a wedding I'm not welcome at." When I hung up, my heart pounded, my hands trembled. But beneath the fear was a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: power. For so long I had bent myself into knots for my children, giving and giving until there was nothing left. But now, finally, I was drawing a line. That night, Emily called. Her voice was sharp, panicked. "Mom, the venue says the payment bounced. What's going on?" I took a breath. "What's going on is that you told me not to come to your wedding. And if I'm not welcome there as your mother, I won't be financing it either." There was silence, then a gasp of disbelief. "Mom, you can't be serious. Andrew's family will." "I am serious," I said. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. "I've given enough, Emily. More than enough. If you don't want me there, then you don't get my money either." She exploded, calling me selfish, accusing me of ruining her big day. Her words burned, but I held my ground. For the first time, I wasn't begging for her love. I wasn't chasing her approval. I was standing still, letting her rage wash over me like a storm that could no longer drown me. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet and realized something profound. Maybe love wasn't about sacrifice after all. Maybe it was about respect. And if my own daughter couldn't give me that, then I owed it to myself to stop giving everything away. The days after that phone call with Emily felt like I was standing inside a storm of silence. Not the kind of silence that comforts or gives rest, the kind that rings in your ears, pressing against your chest until you can't breathe. My phone buzzed constantly, not with calls from my daughter, but with emails from vendors, reminders from the venue, and eventually messages from Andrew's side of the family. They were polite at first, then sharp, and finally almost threatening. "Mrs. Collins, we understand there's been a delay in payment. Mrs. Collins, without the transfer, we cannot guarantee the event. Mrs. Collins, the deposit will be forfeited if not resolved immediately." Each time I read those words, I felt the sting of humiliation, yet also a strange relief. For once, I wasn't swooping in to save everyone. For once, I wasn't killing myself to keep appearances intact. Emily didn't call again. Days passed, then a week. I thought she might show up at my door, demand answers in person, force me to explain myself until I broke. But instead, she sent Sophia, her maid of honor, her best friend since high school. I'll never forget that knock on my door. When I opened it, Sophia stood there, her face tight with discomfort. She held a folder of contracts, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Margaret, can we talk?" I let her in, brewed tea, and waited. Finally, she laid it out. The wedding was unraveling. Without my $50,000, the caterer canceled. The florist pulled out, the photographer demanded full payment up front. Emily and Andrew didn't have that kind of money. They had counted on me blindly, without ever imagining I might say no. "She's devastated," Sophia whispered, eyes searching mine. "She doesn't understand why you'd back out now after everything." I swallowed hard, fighting the tears that threatened. "Sophia, she told me not to come. She told me to watch through a live stream like a stranger. Do you understand how that felt?" Sophia's eyes softened, but she didn't argue. She knew. She had been in my home, eaten my food, seen my exhaustion over the years. She had witnessed sacrifices Emily often ignored. But still, she pressed gently. Margaret, it's her wedding. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she didn't mean it. I shook my head. No, she meant it. And even if she didn't, the words were said. Words don't disappear just because you regret them later. They lodge themselves in the person who heard them and they cut. Sophia sipped her tea in silence after that. When she left, she hugged me longer than expected. I'll try to talk to her, she said. But stand your ground if you must. I think she needs to learn. That night, I lay awake replaying everything. My daughter had asked me not to come to her wedding. That wound didn't just bruise, it split me open. Every memory of her childhood came flooding back sharper than knives. The time she broke her arm at 8 and I stayed up all night holding her while she cried. The time she didn't get invited to a birthday party and I baked her a cake so she wouldn't feel left out. The time she called me from college panicked about rent and I wired money I didn't have. All those moments, all those sacrifices, piled into the shadow of that email. And suddenly I began to wonder, had I raised her to believe love meant endless giving, without gratitude? Had my sacrifices taught her that my pain didn't matter, as long as she got what she wanted? Luke came by a few days later, his guitar slung over his shoulder, his face set in quiet fury. "She's lost her mind," he muttered as he dropped onto my couch. "Do you want me to talk to her?" I shook my head. "No, Luke. This is between her and me. You don't need to carry this burden." But he leaned forward, eyes burning. "Mom, you carried us alone for decades. Let me carry some of it now. She doesn't get to treat you like this, not after everything." His anger both comforted and saddened me. I didn't want my children divided, but I couldn't deny the relief of having at least one of them see me truly see me. I hugged him tightly, breathing in the faint scent of tobacco and rain on his jacket. "Promise me something," I whispered. "Promise me you won't hate her. She's still your sister." He pulled back his jaw tight. "I promise I'll try." The wedding date drew closer, and the cracks widened. Rumors swirled through the family. Some said I was sabotaging Emily's big day. Others said Emily had disrespected me beyond forgiveness. The truth lived somewhere in the middle, tangled in love and betrayal, sacrifice and resentment. I avoided gatherings, unwilling to be the villain in whispers. One evening, my sister-in-law called. Her voice was sharp, judgmental. "Margaret, family is family. You don't turn your back over one email. You've always been dramatic." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. Dramatic. That word echoed like a slap. As if decades of carrying everyone alone, as if burying my husband too young, as if working until my bones ached were mere theatrics. I ended the call politely, but when I hung up, I broke. I sobbed into my pillow, grief shaking me to my core. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about a lifetime of being unseen, unheard, unappreciated. And now my own daughter had turned that invisibility into cruelty. But when the tears dried, something inside me hardened. I realized this was not just a battle over money or a seat at a wedding. This was about my worth. For too long, I had defined my value by what I gave others. For too long, I had let my love be measured in dollars and sacrifices. No more. When Emily finally called again, her voice was raw with panic. "Mom, please, the wedding is falling apart. We need you. Just this once. Can't you?" I cut her off. My voice was calm, steady, foreign even to me. "No, Emily. Not this once. Not ever again, if this is what it costs me. I will not fund my own erasure. I will not pay to be excluded from my child's life." She sobbed, begged, cursed, accused. But I held the line. For the first time in decades, I didn't bend. When the call ended, I sat in silence, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. But beneath the fear, I felt something stronger: liberation. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about reclaiming myself. The week before the wedding was supposed to be filled with joy. Final dress fittings, family dinners, laughter spilling from every corner of the house. But instead, my phone was a war zone. Vendors I had once spoken to with excitement now called me with cold reminders of overdue balances. Emily's friends sent curt texts asking what had happened, why I had suddenly turned my back. Even Andrew himself reached out, his tone clipped and businesslike, as if I were merely a supplier reneging on a contract. "Margaret, I don't understand why you're putting Emily through this," he said in one message. This is her big day. Don't you want her to be happy? I stared at his words, the arrogance behind them. Don't I want her to be happy? Wasn't that the very question that had defined my entire life? Every sacrifice I had made, every dream I had buried, every penny I had scraped together, wasn't it all for her happiness? And yet none of it seemed to matter. Because in their eyes, happiness was something I could only provide with a checkbook, not with my presence, not with my love. The irony was unbearable. I had been written out of my own daughter's story, reduced to an ATM, and then blamed when I refused to play the part. That night, I pulled out the shoebox of old receipts and letters I kept under my bed. Tuition payments, rent transfers, utility bills. Each slip of paper was a testament to my life's work, not promotions or vacations or investments, but survival scraped together one sacrifice at a time. I spread them out on the bed and stared at them like artifacts from a life I no longer recognized. Was this my legacy that I gave and gave until there was nothing left of me? The tears came hot and bitter. I thought of the little girl Emily used to be, the one who clung to my leg on her first day of school, the one who cried into my chest when her first boyfriend broke her heart, the one who once whispered, "Mom, you're my best friend." Where had that girl gone? Or had she ever truly existed outside of my desperate need to believe she loved me? 3 days before the wedding, the real panic began. Sophia showed up again, her face pale, her voice trembling. They've had to downsize everything, she confessed, sitting at my kitchen table. The venue dropped them, the caterer backed out. They're moving it to Andrew's parents' backyard now. Emily's... She's unraveling. I felt a pang in my chest. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just sorrow. Because this wasn't how it was supposed to be. I had imagined her walking down the aisle radiant, not desperate. I had imagined standing in the front row, tears in my eyes, not shut out behind a computer screen. Sophia reached for my hand. She keeps saying you don't love her, that you abandoned her when she needed you most. I pulled my hand back, my throat tight. I didn't abandon her. She abandoned me first. She told me I wasn't welcome. She erased me from the most important day of her life. And I can't, Sophia, I can't pay to be humiliated. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the conflict in her loyalty to Emily, but understanding of me. She nodded slowly. Maybe she needs to lose this to finally see what she's done. After she left, I sat in the dark, my chest aching. The house felt heavier than usual, filled with ghosts of laughter and arguments and late-night study sessions. I could almost hear Richard's voice, deep and steady, telling me to be strong. He had always believed in balance, in fairness. Don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm, he used to say when I overextended myself. I had ignored him, but now in the silence of widowhood his words felt like prophecy. The night before the wedding, Emily called again. This time her voice wasn't angry, it was broken. "Mom, everything's falling apart, I don't know what to do." My heart clenched. For a moment I almost gave in. Almost said, "I'll fix it, sweetheart. I'll send the money. I'll save you again." But then I remembered the email. I remembered her cold dismissal. I remembered decades of being taken for granted. And I realized that saving her this time would only cement the cycle that she would never respect me if I didn't respect myself first. So I swallowed the ache in my throat and said softly, "Emily, I'm sorry you're hurting, but I can't do this anymore. I can't give until there's nothing left of me. You'll have to find another way." She sobbed, she begged, she told me I was cruel, heartless, abandoning her. But beneath the noise I heard something else, panic giving way to realization. For the first time she was facing consequences I couldn't shield her from. When the call ended, I sat in silence, my tears soaking the pillow. I had never felt so empty, so hollowed out. Yet beneath the grief was a quiet, steady pulse resolve. The morning of the wedding arrived cold and gray. I dressed, simply made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. I didn't go. I didn't watch the live stream. I refused to reduce myself to a pixelated spectator in my own daughter's life. Instead, I sat with my memories, with the ache of everything I had given and everything I had lost. I lit a candle for Richard, whispering to him that I hoped he was proud of me. that I hoped I had finally learned the lesson he had tried to teach me all those years ago. That afternoon, Luke came by. He dropped his guitar case by the door and wrapped me in a hug so fierce it nearly broke me. "You did the right thing, Mom," he said into my hair. "Even if she doesn't see it now, one day she will." I clung to him, my body shaking with silent sobs, because deep down I wasn't sure she ever would. The afternoon sun dipped low as the hours of Emily's wedding ticked by without me. Somewhere across town, vows were being exchanged, photos taken, champagne poured. But I was not there. I sat in my living room, the glow of the candle for Richard flickering the silence around me, thick and unforgiving. Every instinct in me screamed to grab my coat, rush to the venue, even if it was just Andrew's parents' backyard, and beg for a seat at the edge of the ceremony. I could picture myself standing at the back, tears in my eyes, whispering, "That's my daughter. I raised her. I love her." But I stayed put. Because love is not just about showing up when you're welcomed. It's about knowing when not to show up when you've been told you don't belong. That distinction cut like glass. Luke stayed with me that evening. He strummed his guitar quietly, his presence a balm against the ache. Around 7, my phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. She went through with it. Small crowd, maybe 30 people. No flowers, no caterer, just some sandwiches her in-laws threw together. She looked beautiful, but she was crying through most of it. I read the words again and again, my heart breaking in 100 directions. I wanted to scream at Emily. "This is what happens when you cut me out." But another part of me wanted to run to her, hold her, tell her that a wedding isn't everything, that love will carry her through. Instead, I set the phone down and stared at Richard's candle. The flame wavered steady even in its fragility. "Am I cruel?" I whispered to him in my mind. "Or am I finally learning to love myself too?" The days after the wedding were brutal. My family was divided. Some relatives called to scold me, saying I had ruined Emily's big day out of spite. Others quietly confessed that Emily had gone too far, that excluding me was unforgivable. The gossip swirled, but the truth remained simple. A mother had been told she was not wanted, and for once she believed it. Emily didn't call. Not the day after, not the week after. The silence stretched into an abyss. I caught glimpses of photos online, her, in a simple white dress, Andrew at her side, forced smiles beneath a canopy of string lights. My stomach twisted each time, a cocktail of guilt and grief. Was I punishing her too harshly? Had I confused strength with cruelty? Then one evening, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Emily stood there. Her face was pale, her eyes red, her hands trembling around the strap of her purse. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. Mother and daughter separated by a chasm of choices. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stepped aside. She walked in, dropped her purse onto the chair, and stood in the middle of the living room like a stranger. Finally, she turned to me. "Why didn't you come?" The question pierced me. "Because you told me not to," I said softly. Her lips trembled. "I didn't mean it. I was stressed. Andrew's family was pressuring me. They said there wasn't enough space, that it would be easier without you. I thought you'd understand." My heart clenched. Understand what, Emily? That my presence was inconvenient. That decades of sacrifice could be erased with an email. That I was good enough to pay, but not good enough to witness the vows of my own child. Her tears spilled then. "I didn't think you'd actually listen. You always show up no matter what. I thought you'd fight for it." Her words hit me like thunder. I had spent my life fighting for my children against hunger, against loneliness, against a world that wanted to swallow them whole. But in doing so, had I trained Emily to believe that no matter what she did, I would bend, that my love meant I had no boundaries. "I can't fight anymore, Emily," I whispered. "I'm tired. I've fought for you every day since you were born. And when you told me not to come, I finally realized I don't have to fight for a place in my own daughter's life." She sobbed, then collapsing onto the couch. I sat beside her, my hand hovering before I finally placed it gently on her back. We stayed like that for a long time, her crying me, staring at the flickering candle for Richard. Eventually she choked out, "I ruined everything. I shook my head. No, Emily. You didn't ruin everything. You made choices, painful ones, and now you have to live with them. That's not the end, it's just the consequence. She looked at me, her eyes desperate. Do you still love me? The question was absurd, yet heartbreaking. Of course I do, I whispered. I always will. But love doesn't mean I let myself be hurt forever. Love without respect isn't love, it's exploitation. We sat in silence after that, the words sinking deep. She left a little while later, her hug tentative, her apologies soft but unfinished. I watched her walk away, uncertain if the gap between us would ever close. That night, I wrote in my journal a habit I had abandoned years ago. I poured out every thought, every wound, every sliver of hope. And when I finished, I wrote one final sentence that felt like both a prayer and a declaration: I will no longer burn myself to keep others warm. For the first time in my life, I believed it. The weeks after Emily's visit were a blur of emotions I could barely name. Relief, grief, hope, fear. They braided themselves together, pulling me in opposite directions. Some mornings I woke with a heaviness in my chest, aching for reconciliation, for the daughter who used to run into my arms without hesitation. Other mornings I woke lighter, steadier, proud that I had finally learned to draw boundaries, proud that for once in my life I chose myself. The family gossip didn't die down. My sister-in-law called again, her voice sharp, telling me I had humiliated Emily, that people would never forget the mother who abandoned her daughter's wedding. I hung up before she could finish. Not because her words didn't sting, but because I finally realized they didn't define me. For years I had lived beneath the weight of other people's opinions. Now I was learning to live above them. Luke continued to be my anchor. He stopped by often, sometimes with his guitar, sometimes with takeout, always with quiet loyalty. One evening he looked at me across the dinner table and said, "Mom, I think Emily's starting to get it." She called me. She said she feels ashamed. She said she never thought you'd actually walk away. But maybe that's exactly what she needed to grow up. I nodded, my throat tight. I hope so. Because I don't want to lose her forever. I just can't lose myself again in the process. Days turned into weeks, and eventually Emily did call. Her voice was calmer, quieter, as if something in her had softened. "Mom," she said, "can we meet for lunch?" Meet? We met at a small cafe downtown. She looked different, tired, older, her shoulders not quite as square. She ordered tea, her hands fidgeting with the cup. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about what I said. I I was wrong. I was cruel. I don't know why I let Andrew's family pressure me like that. I think I was so desperate to please them I forgot the one person who's always been there for me." Tears stung my eyes. "Emily," she cut me off, shaking her head. "No, let me say this. You've given me everything, Mom. More than I deserved. And when I told you not to come, it wasn't about space or money or logistics. It was about me not valuing you the way I should. I thought your love was so unconditional I could push you aside and you'd still be there. I didn't realize love can break. And I'm sorry." The words I had longed to hear for years finally spilled out, fragile and trembling. I reached across the table, took her hand. "Emily, I'll always love you. But love isn't about erasing myself for you. It's about being seen, respected, cherished. I need you to understand that." Her grip tightened. "I do now. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for what I did, but I want to make it right." We sat there in silence, hands clasped, two women bound by blood and years of mistakes, trying to build something new out of the rubble. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if trust could ever be fully restored, but for the first time I believed it was possible. Later that night back home, I lit Richard's candle again. The flame flickered gently, casting a soft glow across the room. I whispered into the quiet, "I did it. I finally listened to you. I finally chose not to burn myself for warmth that was never returned." The lesson wasn't easy. It came wrapped in pain and loneliness, in the jagged edges of betrayal, but it was a lesson all the same. Love without respect is a cage, and sacrifice without gratitude is a wound that never heals. I had spent my life giving until there was nothing left. Now I was learning that true love, whether from a child, a partner, or even myself, meant balance. Emily and I are still rebuilding. There are awkward pauses, cautious steps, small gestures of repair. Sometimes the distance between us aches, but sometimes it feels like space for growth. Luke continues to tease me, to hug me fiercely, to remind me that motherhood isn't defined by one child's mistakes, but by the strength it takes to keep loving, even when it hurts. And me, I'm still learning. Learning to rest, learning to say no, learning that I am more than the sacrifices I made. If you're listening to this story, maybe you see yourself in me. Maybe you've given until your hands are empty, until your heart feels hollow. Maybe you've been told love means silence, obedience, endless sacrifice. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't. Love can be strong and soft at the same time. Love can give, but it must also receive. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to choose yourself. That's what I finally understood when my daughter told me not to come to her wedding. It shattered me. But in that shattering, I found the pieces of myself I thought I had lost forever. And I will never let them go again. So if my story has touched you, if you felt the weight of sacrifice without recognition, I invite you to stay with me. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And please leave a comment. Tell me when you learned to choose yourself, when you realized your love was worth more than endless giving. Because your story matters. And your worth is not measured by how much you sacrifice, but by how fully you are seen.